I trusted my mother completely. She was the one person in my life I never questioned, the one voice I always believed, the one face that made me feel safe no matter what was happening around me. Growing up, she was my entire world, and even as an adult, I still leaned on her for guidance, comfort, and reassurance. So when I say that everything I believed about my life changed the day I saw those papers, I mean it in the deepest, most painful way possible. My name is Sarah, and for most of my life, I thought I had a simple, honest family story. My father passed away when I was 9, leaving my mother to raise me alone. She worked long hours, sacrificed everything, and never once made me feel like I was a burden. She always told me how proud she was of me, how strong I was, how my father would have been proud too. I believed every word, and I built my entire identity around being the good daughter who made her mother's sacrifices worth it. We lived in a modest house, nothing fancy, but it was filled with warmth, routines, and the quiet comfort of knowing we had each other. Every birthday, every school event, every difficult moment, my mother was there, smiling through her exhaustion, telling me that love was all we needed. As I grew older, I started to notice small things that didn't quite add up, but I brushed them aside because questioning my mother felt wrong. There were moments when she avoided certain topics, especially anything related to my father's past or our family finances. If I asked about inheritance or legal matters, she would laugh it off and say, "Why worry about such things? We have each other." I accepted that answer because it felt comforting, and I didn't want to dig into things that might bring back painful memories for her. She always framed our life as simple and honest, and I never had a reason to doubt her. After all, she had given up so much for me, and I felt I owed her my trust. When I got married, my mother became even more involved in my life. She helped plan the wedding, offered advice on everything from cooking to budgeting, and reminded me constantly to be grateful for the stability I had. My husband, Amir, respected her deeply and often told me how lucky I was to have such a caring mother. She seemed happy for me, proud of the woman I had become, and supportive of my new chapter. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I noticed a shadow in her eyes, like she was carrying something heavy that she never spoke about. Still, I told myself it was just the weight of years of responsibility, nothing more. The first real crack in my perfect image of her appeared when we started looking for a new house. Amir and I wanted to move closer to his workplace, and we needed to sort out our finances properly. That meant reviewing all our documents, savings, and any potential family assets that could help with the down payment. I casually mentioned to my mother that we might need copies of some old papers, especially anything related to my father's property or savings. Her smile froze for just a second, barely noticeable, but enough to make my chest tighten. She quickly changed the subject, talking about how stressful moving could be and how we should take things slow. I didn't push, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me longer than I expected. A few days later, I visited her house to pick up some old childhood photos she had promised me. While she was in the kitchen making tea, I wandered into her bedroom to look through the photo album. Her room was always neat, almost too neat, like nothing was ever out of place. As I opened the wardrobe, I noticed a stack of files on the top shelf, hidden behind winter clothes. I don't know what made me reach for them, but something inside me felt restless, like I was standing on the edge of a truth I wasn't ready for. I told myself I was just being curious, that there was nothing wrong with looking at old family documents, especially if they might help with our house search. The files were thicker than I expected, filled with official-looking papers, legal stamps, and signatures. My heart started beating faster as I flipped through them, not because I saw something shocking right away, but because I felt like I was reading a part of my life that had been kept from me. There were property records, bank statements, and legal agreements with my father's name on them. My father, who I had always been told left us with nothing but memories and love, apparently owned more than I ever knew. The numbers on those papers didn't match the story I had grown up with, the story of financial struggle and endless sacrifice. My hands trembled as I read further, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. According to these documents, my father had left behind a decent amount of savings and a small piece of land in another city. The funds were supposed to be managed in trust for me until I reached adulthood. My name was right there, clearly written, alongside legal terms I'd barely understood. I felt dizzy, like the room was spinning around me, because none of this had ever been mentioned before. Not once had my mother told me about any inheritance or property. Instead, she had always painted our life as a story of surviving with very little, of making do with what we had. When she called my name from the kitchen, my heart jumped. I quickly put the files back where I found them, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. I walked into the kitchen, trying to look normal, but I knew my face must have looked pale. She handed me a cup of tea and asked if I was feeling okay, her eyes searching my face with a strange mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite read. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside my thoughts were screaming. Why had she hidden this from me? Where had the money gone? And what else didn't I know about my own life? That night, I couldn't sleep. Amir noticed my restlessness and asked what was wrong, but I told him I was just stressed about the house search. I wasn't ready to share what I had found because I needed time to process it myself. My mother had always been my anchor, the person who made me feel secure, and now that image was cracking in a way that scared me. I kept replaying our past conversations in my head, remembering how confidently she had talked about sacrifice and hardship, how she had never mentioned any financial support from my father's side. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how carefully controlled the story of our family had been. Over the next few days, I found myself watching my mother more closely. Her words, her expressions, even the way she avoided certain topics started to feel different. It was like I was seeing her through a new lens, one that showed both the loving parent I knew and a stranger who had kept secrets from me for years. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but I was afraid of what I might hear. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation, something that would make everything make sense and restore the trust I had always felt. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from a distant relative I barely spoke to. She mentioned something about my father's land and how surprised she was that I hadn't been involved in its management. Her words confirmed what I had seen in those papers and made it impossible to pretend anymore. My stomach twisted with anxiety as I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a forgotten detail. This was a deliberate secret, and my mother was at the center of it. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The truth was too heavy and the questions were too loud. I had trusted my mother with everything. My heart, my future, my understanding of who I was. Now, with those hidden papers burned into my memory, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a revelation that could change our relationship forever. And as much as I wanted to protect the bond we shared, I also knew I deserved to understand my own life and the choices that had been made for me without my knowledge. When I decided to confront her, I had no idea how deeply the truth would cut, or how much it would force me to rethink not just my past, but the woman I had always called my hero. I didn't confront my mother right away. For a few days, I carried the weight of those papers in silence, letting the questions grow heavier with every passing hour. Each time she called to check on me or asked how the house search was going, I felt a strange mix of comfort and resentment. Her voice still sounded warm and familiar, but now it also felt like it was hiding something. I kept replaying the moment I found those files, the way my hands shook, the way my heart sank when I saw my name on documents that proved my life wasn't as simple as I had believed. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was also afraid of breaking the fragile peace we had always shared. One evening, I finally decided I couldn't keep pretending. I visited her again, telling Amir I needed to talk to my mother about something important. As I walked into her house, everything looked the same. The tidy furniture, the soft lighting, the familiar smell of tea and home. But inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. We sat in the living room and she started chatting about small things, the weather, her neighbors, how proud she was of me. I listened in silence, my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to speak. When I finally brought up the papers, her expression changed instantly. The warmth in her eyes faded, replaced by a tight, guarded look I'd never seen before. I told her what I had found in her wardrobe, my voice trembling as I asked why she had never told me about my father's savings or the land in his name. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then she sighed, looking away from me, and I knew this wasn't going to be a simple explanation. She told me that my father's family had been complicated, that there were legal disputes and people who wanted to take advantage of us. She said she had hidden the truth to protect me, to keep our life simple and free from conflict. But the more she spoke, the more her stories started to feel rehearsed, like something she had practiced in her head many times. When I asked where the money had gone, her answers became vague. She mentioned expenses, investments that didn't work out, and the cost of raising me alone. None of it added up to the numbers I had seen on those documents. My chest tightened as I realized she wasn't telling me everything. I pressed her gently at first, reminding her that I wasn't a child anymore, that I deserved to know the truth about my own future. That's when her tone changed. She became defensive, almost angry, accusing me of being ungrateful and suspicious. She reminded me of all the sacrifices she had made, the sleepless nights, the years of hard work. Her words made me feel guilty, like I was betraying her by asking questions. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The real betrayal hit me a few days later, when I decided to consult a lawyer. I needed clarity, not just emotionally, but legally. I brought copies of the documents I had secretly taken photos of, hoping to understand what my rights were and what had actually happened to my father's assets. The lawyer's calm, professional tone only made the truth harder to swallow. He explained that the trust set up in my name should have been protected, and that any major use of those funds would require proper documentation and justification. From what he could see, there were large withdrawals over the years that didn't match the basic living expenses my mother had described. Hearing that felt like someone had punched me in the chest. My mother hadn't just hidden the truth, she had controlled it. She had made decisions about my inheritance without involving me, without giving me a choice. The woman I trusted most in the world had shaped my reality in a way that served her, not me. I walked out of the lawyer's office feeling numb, like I was carrying a secret too big to breathe with. When I confronted her again, this time with clearer questions and more confidence, the atmosphere changed completely. She cried, raising her voice, telling me I was turning against her. She said she had done everything for me, that she deserved whatever support my father had left behind. Her words hurt, not just because of what they meant, but because they showed me a side of her I had never seen before. She wasn't just my loving mother in that moment. She was someone who had chosen control over honesty. I went home that night and broke down in Amir's arms. For the first time, I told him everything. He listened quietly, holding me while I cried, reminding me that my feelings were valid, that wanting the truth didn't make me a bad daughter. His support gave me strength, but it didn't take away the pain of realizing that my entire childhood story was built on half-truths. I felt betrayed, not just financially, but emotionally. My trust had been taken for granted, and my future had been shaped without my consent. That's when something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing myself as just the obedient daughter who accepted whatever she was told. I started to see myself as a woman who deserved honesty, respect, and control over her own life. I wasn't interested in revenge in a dramatic sense, but I knew I couldn't let this go quietly. I needed accountability, and I needed my mother to understand that her choices had consequences.
My plan wasn't about hurting her. It was about reclaiming my voice and my rights. I gathered all the documents I could find, consulted the lawyer again, and learned what steps I could take to protect what was left of my inheritance. I also decided to have a final, honest conversation with my mother, not from a place of fear or guilt, but from a place of strength. When I sat across from her for the last time to talk about this, my heart still hurt, but my voice was steady. I told her how her secrecy had affected me, how it had made me question my own reality and my own worth. I didn't accuse her with anger, but with clarity. She listened, quietly this time, her eyes filled with something that looked like regret. Whether it was genuine or not, I couldn't tell. What I did know was that I was done living in the dark. That conversation didn't fix everything. It didn't magically restore our old relationship or erase the years of hidden truths. But it marked the moment I stopped being just the daughter who trusted blindly and became a woman who demanded honesty. And as painful as that transformation was, it also gave me a sense of control I had never felt before. Still, the real test was yet to come, because standing up for myself would mean facing the consequences of uncovering the truth, both for me and for my mother. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life, not because of legal battles or financial stress, but because of the emotional distance that grew between my mother and me. We still spoke, but our conversations were careful, almost polite, as if we were strangers trying not to say the wrong thing. The warmth we once shared had been replaced by an awkward silence, and every word felt like it was weighed down by everything we weren't saying. I missed the comfort of our old relationship, but I also knew I couldn't go back to pretending nothing had happened. With the lawyer's guidance, I took steps to review what remained of my inheritance. The process was slow and complicated, filled with paperwork, meetings, and difficult discussions. But for the first time, I felt like I was actively shaping my own future, instead of simply accepting the version of life that had been handed to me. Each document I signed, each question I asked, reminded me that I had a right to understand and protect what was meant for me. My mother didn't fight me legally, but emotionally, the tension was undeniable. She often reminded me of her sacrifices, of the years she spent raising me alone, and while I acknowledged those efforts, I no longer let them silence my need for honesty. I told her that love and sacrifice didn't give anyone the right to control someone else's life through secrecy. Sometimes she would cry, sometimes she would stay quiet, and sometimes she would change the subject altogether. But I stayed firm, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. The real climax of this journey wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a public reveal. It was a quiet moment of realization. One evening, as I sat alone in my new home with a mirror, surrounded by boxes and unfinished furniture, I felt a strange sense of peace. This space, imperfect and still in progress, represented something I had never truly had before, a life built on my own choices. I thought about my mother, my father, and the story I had grown up believing, and I finally allowed myself to accept that people can be both loving and flawed at the same time. When I eventually visited my mother again, our conversation was different. We didn't argue about the past or the money. Instead, we talked about boundaries, about trust, and about how our relationship could move forward in a healthier way. I told her I still loved her, but that I needed honesty to feel safe. She nodded, her voice softer than before, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like she was really listening. I learned that standing up for myself didn't mean abandoning my family. It meant redefining the way we treated each other. My mother had carried her own fears and insecurities for years, and while that didn't excuse her choices, it helped me understand them better. I stopped seeing her as either a hero or a villain and started seeing her as a human being who made mistakes. The biggest change, though, was within me. I no longer felt like the little girl who accepted everything she was told. I felt like a woman who could face uncomfortable truths without losing herself. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it became a lesson, a reminder that trust should be built on honesty, not just love. Looking back, I realized that those papers didn't just reveal financial secrets. They revealed the importance of knowing your own story, of asking questions, and of protecting your future. I trusted my mother completely, and while that trust was shaken, it also pushed me to grow in ways I never expected. My life isn't perfect, and my family isn't flawless, but I now walk forward with clarity, strength, and the confidence that my future belongs to me. And that, more than any document or legal decision, is the truth that changed everything.